Before we can dive into talking about how to communicate about nutrition, we have to be clear about what we're standing on. And what we're standing on is a body of evidence. Nutrition is a science, not an opinion. This is a very common thing you might see RDs reminding people. We have to stand on the evidence that we have because this is a body of science. I love vintage ads. I have one up here that really illustrates how far we've come when it comes to science and knowing what's safe. So this was an ad for toothache drops for children, and it was around the 1890s that this was a real thing, and these toothache drops contained cocaine. Now, this was probably very effective at helping children with their toothaches, but what we know now is that it's not safe to give cocaine to children or anybody. And so the body of evidence changed what we could say about these particular toothache drops. So the opposite of nutrition evidence is quackery, and quackery has been around for a very long time. It's not something that's new, but this is a definition from quackwatch.com on what a quack is. It is one who talks pretentiously without the sound knowledge of the subject discussed. You can probably think of quite a few examples of quacks who exist in modern day. On the side, I have another vintage ad. This is for a bottle of heroin, and it was produced by the Bayer Company. This was sold to people right around the 1900s. It was sold as a so-called non-addictive substitute for morphine, and also it was promoted as a useful treatment for children who had a strong cough. Now, again, very effective, but not very safe. So back to quackery. Quackery promotes ideas or methods without scientific evidence of effectiveness or safety. Those two key words are key. Something has to be effective in order to be accurate, but it also has to be safe. And sometimes people will be promoting treatments, especially today, that are safe but not effective, and that still is quackery. Sometimes quackery is the same thing as fraud, but not always. How do you know? Well, quackery is fraud when the person or the company is intentionally spreading misinformation in order to gain something. So it might be they're trying to sell something, it might be they're trying to get famous, but that intention is there. I have a picture on the bottom of a product that was sold not too long ago. They were called Sensa sprinkles, and the premise was that you would sprinkle your food with this product and it would help you lose weight. So you didn't have to pay any attention at all to what you were eating. All you had to do was sprinkle your food, and magically it would target fat cells, or I'm not sure what it said it did, but it was fraud. And this company was shut down by the FTC because they were knowingly committing fraud. There was absolutely no evidence at all behind this product, and the company knew it. They were intentionally spreading misinformation. Many times, however, quackery is not intentional. It's just simply misinformation. So the person spreading the information doesn't actually have the background, and they just say what they want. Especially with nutrition, people develop very strong beliefs based on their own opinion and on their own life experience, and then they spread that information. But they're not intentionally trying to sell something, they're just wrong, and it's still quackery. So it happens a lot of times because of our language, because we say things like green tea will melt away body fat. That's quackery because it's not accurate. The research might show that green tea elevates your metabolism so that you burn 1 or 2 more calories after you drink it, but that's not the same thing as melting away body fat. And so this semester we're focusing a lot on our language because it's all about communication for this semester. Sometimes quackery happens because we think we know something, but it's not actually based on scientific evidence. So for example, how many times have you heard that we should make sure not to eat after a certain time at night, so say after 7 p.m., because our body is more likely to turn that into body fat? Well, it turns out that this is not actually true. what happens is when people do tend to eat late at night, they tend to overeat because our dinner meals tend to be very large and the snacks that we eat at night tend to be high in calories. So we'll sit down with a bowl of ice cream or some chips at night. That's not something that we do typically culturally in the morning. And so we do tend to overeat calories at night. Also, people tend to be very sedentary at night. And so those calories do tend to put on weight, but it's not the fault of the time of day. It's just culturally what we tend to do late at night. And so there's no evidence at all that calories you intake at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. are different somehow than calories you intake at 10 a.m. or 12 noon. But the type of food that we consume and the amount of food that we consume does tend to make a difference. Another example, you may have heard that sugar causes kids to be hyper. This is actually not supported by scientific evidence. If you think about kids and sugar, when we, as parents or people who are with kids, when we observe kids getting hyper after they've had a dose of sugar, think about the situation that we tend to be in. So it tends to be very exciting times like birthday parties, events that are not really typically part of the day. So going out for ice cream is exciting. And then a lot of times with sugar intake, a child might also be intaking caffeine. So if they're having soda, that soda comes with caffeine, and caffeine is known and scientifically demonstrated to make kids more hyper. Also, when kids have a lot of sugar, so say something like Halloween, they also tend to experience sleep deprivation because of the excitement of the day. Sleep deprivation can make kids a little bit more hyper, but the sugar itself does not cause hyperactivity. They've actually demonstrated it in many different research studies to see if it's true, if sugar independently makes kids hyper. It does not. But we spread this because we believe it to be true. We need to be careful to check with the evidence first. So our body of evidence in the field of nutrition comes from published research in peer-reviewed scientific journals. This is where we get all of the information that we must then relate to the public. If what we are saying is not based on a published research study, then it is not true. It's not accurate. So we always have to go back to the published research. This is the foundation of what we talk about. Also, it's important to realize that there are levels of evidence, from weak evidence, so things like case studies, for example, to very strong evidence, things like meta-analysis, systematic reviews. We're going to talk about levels of evidence moving forward in this class, but for now, it's important to have that firm understanding of where our body of evidence comes from. Okay, so just a few little things about research and research studies and what we can do with them. It's important to remember that research findings are not black or white. The public tends to want us to give them black or white messages. So you might hear somebody say, okay, are carbs good for you or are they not good for you? Should I eat sugar or should I not eat any sugar at all? The answer is usually it depends, and it's usually somewhere in the middle. So it's not necessary to completely eliminate sugar, but you don't want to go crazy eating a lot of sugar either. So it's never black or white. Research also takes time to develop, and so this can also drive the public crazy, particularly when a new fad diet comes out and people really start paying attention to it. There may not be research yet to back up that diet because it's so new. Research takes time. It takes a lot of time to conduct a research study and get it published, and so the findings from research might not be there yet for that fad diet. Research findings can be conflicting, and this is another source of frustration for the public. Over on the right side, I have a couple of headlines that are from research studies into news stories, and one of them is talking about how coffee is linked to a longer life, and the other one is talking about the health danger of coffee. This drives the public crazy. But what we know as health professionals is that these are probably based on these two news news headlines are probably from different studies, and different studies may have different purposes. So one may be giving a very high dose of caffeine to rats, for example, while the other may have been looking at population data over the course of 15 years and looked to see of the coffee drinkers, did they live longer than non-coffee drinkers? These are two different types of studies. So we have to be more comfortable with conflicting results, because that's what research does provide us, is that these conflicting results, but they apply in different situations. Research rarely proves, and I will say this again and again through the semester, we do not use the word proves or proven in the healthcare field. True professionals do not. Quacks use it all the time, but if you are a health professional using scientific evidence as your basis, you do not use the word proves, because research does not prove anything. Research study only adds to our body of evidence. So we can have strong evidence on a topic or weak evidence on a topic, but nothing is ever proven. So research is done in order, as I mentioned earlier, in order to see if something is safe but also effective. So for example, the paleo diet. Is it safe? And is it effective? Those are two different things. It might be perfectly safe, but not very effective. Or it might be very effective, but not very safe. And so it looks at things like dose, length of time. So for example, with dose, something that is safe and effective at one dose would be vitamin A. Vitamin A is something that's very safe and very effective at preventing blindness in children at a certain dose, but in high doses it can actually be toxic. And so when we're looking at research study results, we need to look at that. And then we also need to consider the length of time that they did the study. So for example, if they are looking at the paleo diet and finding it to be very effective at weight loss, we need to consider, is this a long-term result, or did they just lose weight over the course of a couple of months? Because what we're really concerned with is, are they able to maintain that weight loss over time? Most fad diets have shown that they're only effective in the short term, not the long term. So these are the things we need to consider.